Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Lone Ranger, and welcome back to the Lone Ranger podcast. We got a great show for you today. Before we get started, I want to say thank you for everybody that is supporting the Lone Ranger platforms, Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. We're doing very, very well there. And also want to say thank you for everybody that tuned in to our second episode, Trust the Process, The Art of Closing a Deal. That episode and first installment has gone over 2,600 views. So we're reaching the masses. So definitely appreciate your support. If you aren't following, please follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the Lone Ranger 08. And you can look in the search engine on YouTube, the Lone Ranger podcast, and look for the symbol. But without further ado, definitely want to welcome you to the show. And I am the Lone Ranger. Give it up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, to get started, we're going to go into part two of our Trust the Process, the Art of Closing the Deal. Now, if you tuned in on the last episode, we started off from the beginning, the foundation, where you're basically introducing yourself to the prospect or to the borrower. You're doing some fact finding by asking them some questions as far as what their goals are and what they're trying to accomplish. And then from there, you're kind of matching, the product or service that you're offering to that problem, and you're overcoming some objectives and things of that sort, kind of just breaking the ice, if you will. But now that you have gotten all the information you need from that first part of the sale process, it's time to move on. And the next part here, in part two of the process, we're going to be discussing qualifying the borrower. Now, what is qualifying the borrower? Basically, just determining whether they can do a few things according to your parameters of your product or service that you're offering. And, if you're able to determine that they're qualified, then you can move forward with the next steps of the sales process. But you got to make sure that before spending any time with the prospect, you got to make sure that they're qualified, because if they can't pay for the product, or they don't qualify for the product because of the guidelines set or whatever, as far as the service that you're offering, you could be wasting your time. So this is a very important part of the sales process, because you can't close on a borrower that they don't, if they don't qualify. So that's very important. Now, let's talk about the factors of the qualification. So in a lot of cases, the factors is going to be, can they use your product or use your service? Can they authorize the purchase? Now I'm in lending, so sometimes we have spouses call in on behalf of their spouse whose name is on the loan, and they try to take an application. And if they're not on the loan, we can't do it. So, from a qualification standpoint, we really don't know what we can qualify them for, because we don't have the primary borrower. So that's very pertinent in the sales process: is can they authorize the purchase of the good or service that you're offering? Now, in keeping, in on the same page as far as can they authorize the purchase, the next thing is, can they make the purchase itself? If they're buying a car, can they afford the down payment, or can they afford the monthly payment? In my case, if I'm doing a loan refi, do they have enough income? Or can they afford the loan that I'm going to be offering them? There's a lot of factors in that. And then lastly, you know, are they adhering to the guidelines of that product or service that you're offering? So like I said before, if you're dealing with a loan, there's a lot of parameters that go into those guidelines. Like for my line of work, their income is a big thing. Their employment history is a big thing. Their credit history is a big thing. Their credit score itself is a big thing. So, whatever you're selling or whatever you're offering, whatever your guidelines are for that particular good or service that you're offering, you want to make sure that that prospect or borrower, is meeting those guidelines. Because if not, again, you're wasting your time. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that I note to all of the new salesmen out there, all the new Lone Rangers that are coming, if the prospect cannot use the product or make the purchase or authorize the purchase or adhere to the guidelines, don't waste your time and move on. I can't tell you how many times someone has called in and, they're just, bumping the gums and just about all this stuff that has nothing to do with what we're trying to accomplish here, and only to find out that they don't qualify. Or they call in for a particular service, but it doesn't match their financial situation. I've had people call in asking for money for home improvements, but they got a 550 FICO score and a bunch of credit cards that are charged off and in collections, and I'm kinda like, "Sir, ma'am, that new kitchen or that upgraded bathroom, isn't as important right now." So, that's very important when you are going over the qualifying process. Now, when you're determining if they can use the product, that's gonna come from fact finding, as far as, what their goals are and what they're trying to accomplish, and you just simply match that product or service with those goals. Now, when you're trying to determine if they can authorize the purchase, it's just a simple question, it's just asking them, "Hey," if in my case, again, using as an example as a loan officer, if someone calls in, they're the only person on the loan, I know that they have the authorization for me to pull their credit to start the process of the application. But if it's a co-borrower that's not on the loan, and I need, I'm sorry, if it's a spouse that's not on the loan, I need to talk to the primary borrower. I need to get their authorization to pull credit. I need to get their authorization to draw up some numbers. I just can't do a refi loan for, you know, someone that's not even on the loan. So that's not how it works. So it's very important that you determine if that person can give the authorization, because if you're dealing with someone that can't, you may have to spend some more time on that particular application. And sometimes you could end up wasting your time if the primary borrower isn't interested. But after you get authorization from the prospect, uh, the end result is the completed transaction, then making the purchase. That comes at closing, and that's going to be further along on the process, and we'll get to that in later episodes. But that's basically how it works. You determine if they can use the product based on the goals that they have told you. You determine if they're the one that's going to be able to authorize the purchase, and then you authorize the purchase and close the deal. That's pretty much how it works. But, after you determine that prospect's, qualification, then it's time to move to the next step, which is basically finding the problems to connect to the solutions. And that's what we're gonna be talking about later on in our next episode of Trust the Process, The Art of Closing the Deal. But this was short and sweet. This is the next step in the process. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next time. This is the Lone Ranger signing out.